So I took an art history class, took a lot of art history classes, but I took one once that really focused on architecture. And I remember after a couple weeks of this class, we'd learned about, of course, lots of different buildings, but also lots of different architects and some of the thought that went into it, particularly from the modern architects where we have a lot of writings and they talk about theory and things like that. And it's like, never can look at a building the same since then, you know. And when I grew up, I would walk through my little town in New York State, and I would look at all the shop fronts that go up one story, you know, you sort of become aware of the different shops that you can go into, but all of a sudden I found myself looking up at the rest of the building above it and all of the cornices and the different kinds of stylings, and just kind of changed my whole perspective on architecture. And so you're a composer and you write incredible things, if I may say so. And I guess what I'm curious to know is what your perspective is on listening to music, and maybe if kind of what your thoughts are for someone who's listening to music for the first time, because I can't help but think, myself included even, that when we listen to music, we don't always necessarily connect with the fact that somebody actually created it. That the choices could have been different than they in fact were. Sure. That the notes that we're hearing are notes that somebody intentionally placed where they placed them. For some kind of a purpose, and of course you're our composer in residence, and so you're writing pieces for us now. But I'm curious to talk even about not new pieces. You know, Pepe Romero's coming soon, and he's going to be playing Pavans by Luis Milan, for example, and of course great music, lots of Spanish music, and it's like, what do you wish everybody knew? Listening, if you know, if people coming into a concert could know something or have a perspective, do you have thoughts about that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think that every second is so exciting because of those choices that come together to make a piece. Every second is just fabulous. One of the interesting things about classical music as opposed to like pop music is the repetition is usually handled differently. In pop music, things repeat a lot. And so you can kind of take your time, and it'll just kind of, you'll get it by the end of the song because you're going to hear it about 10 times. But with classical music or art music, something will happen and it will develop inside a sort of organic way, meaning that like a cell will grow or shrink, or we'll hear it change over time. And then when we do hear repetitions, it's really a big moment. It shows us how the whole piece works in a larger way. So like a classic form for any piece of music is like A, B, A. Like in pop music, it's like a verse, chorus, verse. And in classical music, it could be in a dance where we hear a minuet and then a trio and then another minuet or the repeat of the opening one. So it's interesting to note that when we're listening to classical music, it takes like so much concentration because you're trying to listen to what you heard, understand where you're coming from, guess what's going to happen. That's, I think, one of the things that's really advanced listeners do.
Yeah, secret to an active listener.
Yeah, they think, what's going to happen? What's going to happen, and how is this going to go?
That allows you to even participate in the drama that's sort of unfolding before you. It's funny because I was teaching last night, and I asked a student, do you remember the name of the story that Bilbo Baggins writes in The Hobbit? And of course the student looked at me like this. And I said, you read The Hobbit, right? You saw the movie. But anyway, the name of the story, of course, is There and Back Again, right? And I'm struck by that so often because, of course, he starts in the Shire and he goes and has these experiences, and then he ends up in the Shire. But he's not the same person.
Right.
He's profoundly changed, and I think that that's one of our, story types, right? I mean, it's probably the big story type, is the story type of transformation, even if we end up in music hearing the same thing again, if it's an A-B-A form, for example. Right. So we hear one thing, we go and hear something else, we come back and hear it. Even if the notes are exactly the same, and often they're not, but even if they are, it's up to that performer to take us to a place where we have grown and changed in the process.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's totally analogous to life experience. In fact, if I tell my wife, I love you in the morning, and then I have an incredibly crazy day and I almost die, and then at night I say, I love you, it's slightly different. It changes every time.
That's like every day for me.
Every day.
That's incredible. We have shared that, I think.
That's right. That's right.
So
Actually, there's one really cool thing that I was working with a student in the guitar orchestra, a set of students, and they're playing this beautiful piece by Isaac Albéniz, which is a favorite of the guitarists, called Capriccio Catalan. And it goes through this kind of form that we're talking about. And just before it gets back to the opening of the A, so it goes A and then some stuff, and then right before it returns to the A again, it has this this set of this gesture that isn't with music and pitches that we haven't heard before. And the students were like, this sounds weird.
Yeah.
Why does this sound weird?
Yeah.
And the best way that I could think of describing it is that whenever the composer of this piece uses notes that are distantly related, but they're still related, it's a change in the fabric. If the piece of music, if a motive or the set of pitches is a person, that person goes through all these experiences, just like they go through their experiences. They're a person eating their breakfast, they're a person reading a book, and they're a person, hanging out in the playground or hanging out wherever they are. Each time it's still them, but their context changes. And that's a way to understand how this music changes. It's the context within the identity of this piece that changes over time.
So I'm going to try to sum this up, because this is interesting stuff, and the idea again is this is not for musicians necessarily, but somebody who just loves music and is coming and experiencing music. And I think what you've really focused on is being present at the time that the music is occurring, as a way of really engaging with it, and not only being present, but being aware of change and being aware of transformation as it happens, maybe even projecting it a little bit. And as you're listening to it, trying to imagine yourself what might be coming up, what's the composer going to do next? Yeah. Almost like you're watching a movie and you're wondering, well, what's the character going to do now?
Yeah.
How's he going to get out of this one?
Exactly.
Fantastic. Well, we're surely looking forward to Pepe Romero and all the other great music that we're going to hear this year. And thanks for being our composer in residence. We're going to have a great time.
Thank you, Matt. It's an honor.